There's a lot of discussion at the moment as the world of work changes rapidly as to what skills are needed right now. So this week's YouTube is just a little different. I am sharing a webinar that I did with a friend and colleague, Jeremy Blain, about the skills that managers need right now. Now, this was filmed for our Managers Growth Program, but I think the lessons in it are so valuable for anybody. If you're thinking about what are the skills I need to be showing on my CV when I go for a job interview, if you're thinking about your appraisal and the skills you need to be pulling out and demonstrating, if you're thinking about your development and wanting to get a promotion, say this year, which are the skills you need to demonstrate, then this YouTube is for you. My name is Helen Bryant. I'm the creator of GrowThink, an online learning business to help you learn the skills to thrive in your career. Now, one other thing I should tell you before we get going is that if you look in the section just below the screen, you will see a downloadable infographic that captures all the main skills that Jeremy talks about in today's film. Okay, I'd like to welcome you to this module on managers in the 2020s workplace. First of all, I'd like to welcome Jeremy Blain. Jeremy and I have known each other a long time because we met on our very first day of work in Procter & Gamble on the graduate recruitment scheme a long time ago. We won't tell everybody when. But Jeremy, maybe a great starting place is for you to tell everybody who you are and what you do and what your experience has been.
Yeah, well, thanks for having me for this as well, Helen. It does go back to the early 90s, I believe, without being too specific, when we first met. And we both started in sales, both progressed into management and into general management of business, and then both moved into consulting at certain points and training and a little bit of coaching. And for me now, where I am, I specialize in helping organizations transform to be ready for the future. And of course, that hashtag future of work, as we know, is now and it's with us. And transformation is accelerating, as I'm sure we'll get into. But that's where I really focus. And I do a lot of research on the topic and then try and innovate new solutions and services to help organizations, managers and teams get on board with it quickly.
We think it's a challenging place that managers and leaders have to be in nowadays. Perhaps a great starting place would be for you to really talk about the trends that are affecting our world of work.
Yeah. Well, this is a really interesting question, because if you backtrack really only a few weeks, about 20 weeks or so, then we were already in a phase of transformation in business. We were talking digital transformation, human workforce transformation. We'd come off the back of a 10-year global financial crisis. There was still uncertainty. We had the China-US trade war still going there. We didn't know how our economies were doing. We still had disruption in our workplaces and industries where new starters were coming in and enabled with technologies to do things quite differently and really challenging the norm. So the two big things coming into this decade were still, bizarrely though, for many organizations, the need to digitally transform. This was adopting digital to do business more efficiently, more effectively, more productively, and new ways of working with their workforce. So these two things come together. I actually don't think there is such a thing as digital transformation anymore. It is more whole business transformation. You can't do the digital without the human, and vice versa in this day and age. So with all that in mind, there was a huge challenge coming into this decade for many of those organizations that hadn't transformed themselves already, or were still paying lip service a little bit to it. When we got to January, then of course February hit.
And what happened then, Jeremy?
Well, it is bizarre to me that COVID-19 has been the biggest accelerator in digital transformation in the global workplace. You know, a really interesting statistic is that, again, 20 weeks ago, at the beginning of this year, 44% of companies globally did not even allow remote working. Now, just think about that for a minute.
Yeah.
Fast forward just a few weeks after that, and over 80% of them have been rapidly adopting it and doing things. And there's been a remote work revolution. And what's quite interesting about that is that you've not only got all of the big news about technology. So very early on in this pandemic, there was the big news about Zoom and how it all exploded. And, Zoom now is worth more than all of the US airlines put together in terms of market cap. Which is quite interesting in itself. And I know we both use it as well as a tool going forward. But for many organizations, when they got beyond that and started to get used to the technology, that then became the enabler and they could focus on actually doing the job. So there's been a realization in many industries that had first said, well, why would we do remote? We're a very face-to-face driven organization. So think luxury, for example, think consulting, strategic consulting. And even traditional industries like construction, all of them are now experimenting fast. They're failing fast, failing early, but they're moving forward with this. While not everybody's getting it yet because they're starting from a lower base, those that are now reimagining their business for the post-COVID era. And they're saying, actually, why would we go back to fully how things were when we've now got the opportunity to reinvent? So as devastating as it has been from a human perspective around the world, it has been the catalyst that has been needed in business to really drive the transformation, which had stalled somewhat.
I was talking to a friend of mine who works for one of the large retailers here in the UK, and she said that COVID alone had moved their online digital strategy, so online shopping strategy, forward. They'd hit like year 6 or 7 of their 10-year plan within 3 months. And although they think people will drop back, consumer behavior has changed. People who's in the way they work has changed. So it's very, very deep, isn't it? This level of change in a really short period of time.
Well, it is. And in fact, on the human transformation side of things, I did a piece of research with a partner of mine, Dr. Rochelle Haynes, and it's called the Blended Workforce Revolution, which seemed to be a creeping revolution because not many organizations, leaders, human capital specialists had really formalized it. So what? That has been the growth, if you like, of the gig economy, the independent workforce, increasing contractors within our businesses. So the workforce mix was starting to change anyway. But now what we're seeing is we're seeing, unfortunately, some businesses go out of business. We're seeing more people embracing this way of working and saying, you know what, I can do this a little bit more for myself. But we also predicted in that paper that by 2025, almost half of any company's workforce will be made up of independents versus permanents. And whether those permanents are permanent, part-time permanent, or flexi workers. We've now gone back to that and revised that down to that by the end of 2022, that will be the case. So this big workforce trend is going to really challenge not only how human capital management happens in some of these big companies who are transforming for their existing employees, but how that mix is going to shift and how that will impact their culture, their management of it, the leadership moving forward, and how they engage externally and internally, of course.
What do you think this all means then for managers in particular? Our learners tend to be managers of teams, both virtual and the old style hierarchical real. What do you think the implications are for them?
Well, the biggest need that is emerging out of the whole COVID-19 transformations that we're seeing is the need for a much more open mindset in terms of where possibilities are, how we could reimagine our businesses and what the role of management could be. Many organizations that I've worked with still talking about the need to lead at all levels, but they don't truly empower their employees to do so because they haven't set the foundation stone right. So at management level, you need the mindset that says we can reimagine how our business works. We can also enable it better. And that means that they have to adopt digital very quickly.
Mm-hmm.
So for some managers who haven't done that and who really struggle with technologies that can enable their collaboration, communication, remote meetings, etc., they've got to learn again. They've got to unlearn old ways of doing things, relearn this much more rapidly, and really step up so that they can bring the tech together with the touch, so that they can focus on the human touch without really needing to worry so much about the technology. And that's where there's a bit of tension at the moment with some managers. So that's really key. And then the other element that needs to happen is moving away from things like supervision, short-term performance management, and much more empowering environment and climate for our employees and the teams that they manage. So therefore that we can really unleash leadership at all levels, truly. I call it releasing the inner CEO of our people, because we can do so much more. That's really at the heart of collective and collaborative leadership as well. Now, if that really happens and it's enabled, what it also means is that for management and leadership, then you start to develop a growth mindset and you start to shift your focus from managing performance to coaching for growth. And that's really key. I think one of the new things that potentially management weren't on top of until we've really kind of hit us right now over the last few months is the health and wellness aspect of working remotely, potentially having more permanently dispersed teams, managing more remotely as well. And we need to understand, and we're still understanding, of course, what are the implications. Right now, we haven't quite normalized remote working because many of us through the pandemic, we have kids at home, we're homeschooling, we've got lots of disruption as well as trying to do our job and learn how to do it remotely. That's also causing kind of those problems and those lack of confidence, some mental health issues. So this really comes to the fore about how do we protect our human capital, and particularly with what I said before, whether they're permanent employees or whether they are our valued independent contractors.
Yeah, and those independent contractors have to feel valued because absolutely you can feel very isolated in this new world, can't you?
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah, I was reading something the other day, and it was explaining that COVID had brought about an accidental empowerment. I thought it was a really nice phrase because it's that, exactly as you were saying, this gap between empowerment and monitoring and performance management. And because it wasn't clear, proactive people just got on, and then they found out that they didn't get in any trouble for moving further than they normally would, and doing things that they would normally always go and get permission for. So the system broke around them. Those that carried on suddenly found they had been empowered and were often valued for being empowered. I think it's a really nice way of looking at it.
Yeah, and that's right. And that accidental point is really the fundamental game changer there, because when you're forced into it rather than given a choice. So notionally, many of these leaders and managers talk about digital transformation, talk about how we really need to do it and need to do it, yet nobody's really stepping over into that unknown. When it has been forced on us, like it has through this pandemic, then suddenly we are forced to not just actually do it and embrace it, but rapidly adapt to it. And we have no choice but to unleash the power of our people, because that's how we can make progress more. So that accident has been an experiment which has proved to many organizations that empowerment is the way forward, and leadership at all levels can really benefit the organization and its customers.
Yeah, absolutely. So if we took that thinking forward, what are the skills that you think a manager in the 2020s workplace must have?
Yeah. So how long have you got again?
Top line, Jeremy, top line.
Well, let me fine tune it. So there is this digital toolkit and skill set that many managers need. It's the tools, the methods, learning how to use it so it doesn't become a thing when we're in a meeting. You know, I go to many webinars and meetings, and one thing that I see is that those professionals who are still not confident with the technology if there's an issue with it, we'll start to have a commentary on the technology. Oh, let me just share a document here. And then their voice will slow down. It's like, oh, I can't quite see. Can you see it? Can you see it? Have you got it? So this is still learning. So that learning needs to accelerate a little bit, and that's a real key skill set to get to. The next one is an obvious one, which is the ability not just to manage change, but to lead change, role model the change that we're looking for at management. In fact, for many organizations, and particularly industries that have not been used to remote management, and I mentioned a few before, and I'm thinking luxury and construction particularly, management are having the toughest time in that situation, mainly because they don't want to do themselves out of a job. There's a fear factor there that they're not doing enough. So what they tend to do is micromanage, and they over diarize for the people in their team. There's many meetings, so nobody's getting to really deep work. There's too many meetings and so on. So that change leadership starts, as I said before, with the mindset, but really they have to kind of go through that process and then lead their people through it. Then it's about, we talked about the growth mindset. So fine-tuning remote coaching skills is really key. And what therefore are the collaboration, the communication skills that you need, particularly when you're remote engagement. So for very simple things like when you're addressing someone remotely is looking into the camera, which I am to you right now, although I see you on the screen down here, and I'm desperately trying not to look there all the time because you're not engaging your audience. So it's skill sets like that which seem very, very simple, but not many people have had any awareness of or practice of. Alongside that communication comes, emotional intelligence comes into its own in the remote world, I feel, particularly when we talk about the health and wellness aspects, the more personalized aspects to it as well. And then the two final things I would say is learning how to facilitate meetings, sessions, be they customer sessions, internal sessions, online, fluidly, efficiently, productively in much shorter period of time. So understanding what works online, not trying to replicate what we used to do in the office, which is really a route to failure in remote work. And then the final one I would say is really getting on board with the new ways to measure how we're doing as a business, define strategy, and implement strategy ahead of that, which is being more data driven. So data analytics, understanding what predictive and prescriptive analytics are, understanding how that feeds into more rapid strategic decision making, and then how that falls into shorter, medium term targeting. It's quite different to what it was before.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that journey from a more prescriptive way to a more empowered way, and in particularly the importance of being able to give clarity to individuals and teams about what you want done, and then not worrying, as you said, micromanaging, but letting people go, letting people fail, being able to coach to improve performance is a very different skill set. And indeed, facilitation, both you and I have earned livings by facilitating meetings because people have been unable to be in a meeting and facilitate themselves. But that as a skill set, I think is a really powerful one. It comes back to communication, being able to facilitate communication. Again, I listened to a podcast which was all about managers and leaders increasingly had to be social architects. So creating environments for their teams to do deep work and get things done, as opposed to be in the middle building it with them. It was, unleashing people, and that skill set is very different and demands a very different perspective and mindset all the time, not just in that just now and then. It's an ongoing change of perspective.
Yeah. And in fact, just to build on that, what you just said, that there is another skill set there which is getting a lot of traction at leadership level at the moment, which is all centered around empathy.
Mm.
and more empathetic leadership, more understanding of what we're all going through, how we will still rapidly accelerate and move forward. And it's almost helping us redesign what leadership as well as management looks like in our organizations.
Yeah, it's the two sides, isn't it? It's empathy and then recognizing your biases and your judgments, because often your empathy is lost because your bias and judgment shot forward. So, for example, for many businesses, why the people didn't work flexibly is because they didn't trust people to work from home and get a good job done, because it's been forced onto people. It's like all of a sudden they can see actually things really do get done, and people can get some really deep work done and educate their kids on the side. So, so if we were kind of going forward, what's the one piece of advice that you would give to the managers on this course that would help them be successful in the 2020s workplace?
Well, I've nearly got this right. I've got two. Sorry.
I'll accept that, Jeremy.
The first is speed trumps perfection.
Yeah.
In the day and age that we're living in, we're rapidly transforming, we're experimenting, we're trying new things. We may not quite work on certain things. We may adopt new best practices on another. So speed is really key. So those managers who haven't been used to this, their speed of learning, first of all, is key. But then it's their speed of reimagining and restructuring and reworking with their team in a way that enables them to their full extent. And remember, we do live in the age of version 1, version 2, version 3, where it is more acceptable. I mean, I'm not sure how many times it took SpaceX to keep trying getting those rockets up, but now they've got a couple of astronauts to the International Space Station after about I don't know how many sort of attempts and so on. It's acceptable. It is that speed of action which is key. The second is that empowerment trumps supervision. So that trust that you were talking about, the developing an empathy, developing those human skills which come to the fore in the digital era, will reinforce and enable a greater level of empowerment in our people to help them unleash those inner CEOs, as I call them, not just contributing in their job role, but then starting to contribute at more strategic levels to the business as well. If everybody starts doing that, boy, there is success on the horizon.
Absolutely. I think this inner CEO is a really nice phrase. I mean, both you and I remember we learned the concept of leadership at all levels at when we were quite, graduates. I remember being on the courses up in Newcastle, learning about it. The reality was quite different to sometimes how it was described, but actually the mindset of leadership at all levels is so powerful, because I think what it does, it's the number one thing I think that really helps people is a proactive problem-solving mindset.
Yeah.
So if you have that at your core, that allows you to go faster and not worry too much if it's not perfect, because you kind of think, I will solve that. If it doesn't work, I'll learn from that. And similarly, with regards to supervision versus empowerment, it's the same thing. It's like you believe that in other people. So therefore, you're very clear if you can be clear on your expectations of them and clear with their decision-making scope and what the outcome of the work that you want them to do, sometimes I think you can be amazed how far your team can take you by letting go and empowering them. And that really is leadership at all levels. And when it's some of the most junior people in your organization who come up with some of the best ideas and look at problems in a really different way, that's so important, I think, to really encourage.
Yeah, I totally agree. And there's one example that immediately comes to mind. Company like Spotify, for example, that embody leadership at all levels, where they have their versions of hackathons, where they have ideas sessions where everybody comes up with them. Their Discover Weekly offer, which is tailored to the individual listener, came from one of those and came from an individual contributor in their business. Yeah. So it's not just about empowering them to think differently and act differently and come up with great ideas, but it's then about sponsoring them forward so that they can innovate and contribute to the business at strategic level. Great example of that.
Brilliant. Great example. Thank you, Jeremy. That's been really useful. I know that everybody on our programs will find that your perspective really, really helpful. If they want to connect with you and learn more about you, where do they find you?
LinkedIn is the best place. You'll find that I'm very busy on LinkedIn, sharing a lot, and that comes from a lot of the research that I'm doing around all of these trends that we've been talking about today. You can also look at my website, performanceworks.global, where all of this comes together. And on Twitter, I am at LearnThePlanet.
And we'll make sure that your links are added to this video. And I'd really like to thank you. I definitely learn loads from the research that you've been doing, and you do share really great insights on LinkedIn. So thank you for that.
Thank you for having me, Alan.
You're very welcome, Jeremy. Who would ever have thought that we were doing this when we started work in our early 20s, eh?
I know, not when I was selling frying oil and toilet cleaner in Yorkshire. I really didn't have this in my long-term plan.
Living the dream, living the dream.
Living the dream. Thanks, Helen.
Thank you. Take care. I hope you found that useful. The infographic is in a link just below, so you can download a summary of all the tips that Jeremy shared for the skills we need for the 2020s workplace. If you found this useful, please subscribe, like, and ring the bell. Then you get notified of each and every YouTube that we release. And the more that you subscribe, it helps other people find us. Until next week.